So a few weeks ago I was here, spoke on Vegna, which was feeling tone of experience. And there's the notion that for every experience that arises, whether it be a thought or a sound or a physical sensation in the body, there's a feeling tone associated with it. The Buddha described it as being either pleasant, unpleasant, or kind of neutral. It's part of the four foundations of mindfulness. It's the idea that if we can get in touch with the feeling tone, then we're much more aware of what comes next, which is, or can come next, which is desire, or the action that we take upon that feeling tone. So I thought today I would take that one step further and talk about Tanha in Buddhism, or desire.
When you say feeling tone, are you talking about the feeling tone when you come into the meditation, or the feeling tone that it's a byproduct of the meditation?
A feeling tone is when something comes into your experience. Like if you look at this carpet, immediately, without anything you could do about it, you have a feeling about it. Is it pleasant? Is the color pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Is it neutral? Most of the time it's neutral. Most of the stuff that comes in our experience comes in and out very quickly, and it's very neutral. But some things we really find pleasurable, we reach for them, and some things we find unpleasurable, and we tend to push them away. If we're not aware of that, then we can go into aversion or clinging to our experience. And it's right there in the Four Noble Truths. This is my original version of the Four Noble Truths as I first learned this practice. All life is suffering. The cause of suffering is desire. There is a way out, and the way out is the Four Noble Truths. And I kind of had that idea that all desires are bad, or somehow, and this is the kind of the way I saw the practice. Every time the mind wanted to move out to something, oh, that's a desire. I can see this in my mind. So therefore, it's not a good thing. As I've got older and hopefully somewhat wiser, I've kind of had a differing view of that. So that's kind of what I want to explore a little bit with you today. And I remember many years ago, Rob asked a question. Rob was sitting back here. I think it might have even been in the beginner's course that you took with us. You asked a question about goals in life. I don't know if you remember that at all. And I'm not sure if I was the one who had to answer it. I don't think I was. I think it was Wendy was sitting next to me, and she answered it. But I had no great answer to that at that point. So hopefully in this talk, that answer, at least for me, has come through a little bit better. So hold that thought, Rob.
Been waiting all this time.
Must have been 3 or 4 years ago, I think. But I do remember that. It kind of stuck with me because I did not have the right answer. Well, that's a really good question. So the idea of getting rid of desires is somewhat of a form of aversion, right? Something's come into our experience, and we don't like it for some reason, or we think we don't like it and we want to push it away. Or if we practice that way, what we're doing is pushing away part of our experience. And really, that's not a really great way to practice with what's coming up. So we refer to ourselves as human beings, but there's a teacher in Redwood City, I think, or Palo Alto, Gil Fronsdal. He has a phrase that we are human desirelings. That we are in a field of activity. Everything is impermanent. Everything is constantly changing. And we have to, whether we want to or not, react to what is going on in our experience, in our lives. We have to do it. It's just part of what we do. And so we're constantly having to examine our experience and react to it. And so the point of training is, how do we react to that? How do, when things come up in our experience, what do we do with it? And once again, to know what is pleasant, what is unpleasant in your experience, begin to recognize that and have more responsive mode to what's coming in your experience. So the other thing with this, our minds are designed, when the impermanence is coming at us constantly, our minds are designed to try to find some patterns or try to find some stability in all that impermanence. We're constantly trying to understand, organize, keep the bad away, keep the good in, and this preoccupies a lot of our time and experience. With practice, that can change a little bit. You can be much more open to what is occurring without having to try to push so much away and cling to things. So as people, we've become very good at eliminating at least physical suffering. We have air conditioning, we have plenty of food, we have cars that pulls it around, we have music everywhere, we have stores, we have shopping malls, we have all these things to try to make us comfortable and fulfill these desires. But we have a relentless search for this comfort. And many of us are more unhappy now than when we did not have it. I don't have it with me here, but someone did a study in the 1950s. People lived at a much lower standard of living, but the happiness quotient was much higher. So all these things that we have, all the possessions that we have, has not really created the kind of happiness that we'd hoped for. So what do we do about it? Well, for many of us, we come to Long Beach Meditation, right? And we try to figure all this out. Wow, I've done all this. Many of us have been quite successful at having material possessions, having good careers, relationships, but it doesn't seem to really be enough to really fulfill whatever that is in there. So here we are at Long Beach Meditation, trying to learn something new. This is from Shantideva, who was a teacher in the 8th century. Beings are brief and ephemeral, who fiercely cling to what is also passing. Beings who are brief and ephemeral, who fiercely cling to what is also passing, will catch no glimpse of happiness in this or any life. So he's saying that we are brief and ephemeral. What is out there is brief and ephemeral. If we try to grab onto it, it only leads to suffering. So the Buddha talked about 4 types of this clinging, this grabbing onto experience, or pushing it away. Clinging doesn't necessarily always have to be moving towards, it can also be moving aversion or moving away from the experience you're having. Sense pleasures, the notion of the self itself, clinging to a notion of the self, clinging to views, or trying to figure out something, understand it with your mind. And then that, of course, that doesn't always work, and it changes, so that causes suffering. Routines, rituals, and habits, patterns that we have that we cling to, that we think will keep us safe. So sense pleasures. Life has a lot of unpleasantness associated with it. I'm sure that's not any news to anybody else. New news anyway. So we tend, like I said, we tend to avoid the unpleasant. In many ways, that's necessary to do that. If we're in a situation that isn't appropriate or whatever, it doesn't feel good, a lot of times it's good to get out of it. The second form of suffering, in the sense spheres anyway, is we suffer because we have unobtainable desires. We have desires for wealth, we have desires for fame, beauty, certain types of relationships, certain kinds of success, and then we never seem to arrive at those. So that creates a lot of suffering. One could spend a whole lot of time outside of the present moment involved in trying to reach unobtainable goals. There was a teacher in San Diego. She was a Zen teacher. Charlotte Joko Beck was her name. And she talked about how most people tend to live in a gap. And it's the gap between the present moment, whatever's occurring in the present moment, and your vision of what should be happening in the present moment. And that what ends up happening is most people end up wallowing in that gap as just a way of living, always kind of constantly not being present or not being willing to accept what's occurring right now in the present moment, always reaching for something that they don't have or something that's unobtainable for them. And that inevitably is going to create that suffering because you're clinging to something that doesn't exist or can never exist. At least in my case, fleeting youth and things like that, right? So these things happen, and if you cling to them, then they go away. The third part is sensual desire, which is kind of hard to accept sometimes. And even if you get something and you fulfill a desire, it's not that great. You have that cookie or that fourth glass of wine or whatever you're doing, or even the more mundane ones. You can't figure out what to eat for dinner. You finally have the food that you want and you eat it, and it's good, it's no doubt. You had to be nourished, all that, but it didn't quite do it. You move on. It's real easy then to move on to something else after you've fulfilled that. I've seen it with friends. When you get together to talk to old friends and things, they try to paste together experiences together. Well, I went on this ski trip, and now I'm doing this. I had this dinner. So their way of dealing with the uncomfortableness of the suffering of life is to kind of paste together pleasant experiences all in a row. And the more you can fill that hole, if you will, because of the suffering, they tend to just keep putting pleasant experiences one after another in a row. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, planning, concert tickets, all these things they do. They talk about elaborate vacations, things like that. It's difficult to keep that going. Sometimes they envy them, but not really that much. So desires and aspirations. Rob's questions about goals. Cost-benefit analysis. How do you go forward? We all have to make our way through life. We have to make money. We have to have careers, relationships. How do you sort all that out? Because we are these desirelings, we have to do these things to make our way through. You look down the road at what the result of these actions would be. If I have 4 glasses of wine, then I go to work tomorrow, I'm not going to do as well, and that's the cost-benefit analysis. That would be, maybe that's not the best way to do that. Or if I pursue this goal, it's going to take a lot of time. I have a family. That would mean time I won't be able to spend with my family. What would be the result of that goal? Or if I pursue this goal, it will produce some sort of success for me, which will be able to provide more for other people, then perhaps that goal is a better goal to pursue. So that cost-benefit analysis on desires and goals, long-term, short-term. What am I going to get out of this in the long term? Where we live in an interdependent world, we're all in relationship with one another. What effect does this have on other people? What do my actions have on others? When you think about what you're doing. Gil Fronsdal also makes another point. How do you react in traffic? How can you train yourself to be not so reactive in traffic? How many red lights can you put up without getting impatient and upset? That's a good practice, right? You can't control what's going on out there. You can leave yourself enough time to get somewhere, so you don't have to be upset about that, but you can't control that, right? Crowded city. I live in this city, Long Beach. It seems to be getting more crowded as the years go on. And how do you deal with that? Noise. The noise level seems to be increasing too. So, good ways of practicing letting go, looking at things you can't control. On the more micro level, perhaps when you're sitting or a little more quieter, you can notice the arising of that Vedana, the tone of the experience, and begin to notice what happens next, what the mind does when it goes into, does it go into clinging, or if it goes into clinging, how much thought is associated with it. All good ways to practice. And then there's good old equanimity. This is a quote from Paṇḍita, who's a Burmese meditation teacher, still alive. I think he's in his 90s, but still teaching. The epitome of non-clinging is equanimity, which is not, according to teacher Paṇḍita, insensitivity, indifference, or apathy. It is simply non-preferential. One does not push aside the things one dislikes or grasp at things one prefers. This is the part I like the best. He goes on to say, the way to bring about equanimity is wise attention, to be continually mindful from moment to moment without a break, based on the intention to develop equanimity. In the deepest forms of insight, we see that things change so quickly that we can't hold on to anything, and eventually the mind lets go of clinging. Letting go brings equanimity. The greater the letting go, the deeper the equanimity. Freedom comes when we begin to let go of our reactive tendencies. In Buddhist practice, we work to expand the range of life experiences in which we are free. I really like that. So another teacher, Joseph Goldstein, he makes a real clear distinction between the desire for worldly pleasures and the desire for unworldly pleasures. Worldly pleasures is what I've been talking about. Sense experiences, pleasure in the mind and body. And then unworldly experiences is what probably many of you experience when we meditate, or the effects of meditation in our lives. Unworldly experience, that chattering mind finally slows down and begins to quiet. Insight arises. Concentration states, the jhanas arise. All these are unworldly states that are quite pleasurable, that arise out of practice. And to me, they're really valuable. They tend to want me to practice, keep practicing, number one. And I'm definitely usually in the present moment when they're occurring. And they can be quite meaningful. And I don't have the quotes from the Buddha, but what the Buddha said about it was that these experiencers are valuable because they are on the path to liberation. Whereas outward pleasurable experiences tend to not be. I think many of us already know this. We're here, we come to meditation, we sit regularly at home. We're developing that understanding that that inner experience is very important, that it's very important in our lives, and also perhaps is even more satisfying than a lot of outward pleasant experiences. Yesterday, Travis and I did the meditation of the lagoon. I was a little anxious, and then I saw what I'm now going to refer to as the rolling Zendo, which is Travis's Volvo station wagon. It arrives, and the doors open, and out come the Zofratons and cushions and Donna basket, and in Travis's usual way, sets it very artfully, and so that kind of toned down my nervousness a little, and then I had enough time to meet and greet the people, and my wife was there, which is unusual for her to come with me to meditation. The weather was pleasant. It hadn't gotten hot yet. and I started leading a guided meditation, and then I stopped talking to let people just kind of settle. And my mind just settled very, very nicely. And there was just this nice feeling arose of the pleasantness. There was the birds were chirping, the cars were going by. It just was a fleeting, it didn't last long. And I'm preparing this talk, and I said, I'm not going to cling to this. I'll just let this one. And it did go away within probably 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds. But I said, you know what? This is one of the reasons I meditate. This is one of the real pleasant experiences, or one of the experiences that arises that's just very calm and nice. And it tends for me to crowd, this practice tends to crowd out what could be a lot of less than wholesome activities, watching too much TV or something like that. It's just spend time doing this practice, helping Long Beach Meditation, doing this as an aspirational kind of thing. It brings up that kind of that good inner experience, or inner pleasant experience. So, take a moment, okay? If you start the day without caffeine or pep pills, if you can be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can eat the same food every day and be grateful for it, if you can understand when loved ones are too busy to give you time, if you can overlook when people take things out on you when through no fault of yours something goes wrong, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can face the world without lies and deceit, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without liquor, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, if you can do all these things, then you are probably the family dog. So, I guess that middle way, that balance somehow to all that kind of stuff is important. So, that's my talk on clinging and desire.